Hey guys, Dozer here bringing you a short video here today. Wanted to talk a bit about some core interactions in Prism going forward into the Pro Tour and beyond, maybe the calling and such metagames, so that you can learn all the new weird tech that's been brewing as Prism to try and get not only a feel for what you can do as a Prism player, but also how you can face against Prism players and know what types of tricks they're looking to pull against you. Starting off here, we're going to talk about Merciful Retribution. Merciful Retribution is a light illusionist aura, which can be played as an instant, costs 4, and whenever a aura that they control or attack action card they control is destroyed, the Prism player gets to deal 1 arcane damage to target hero. If the card destroyed is a non-token light card, the card goes to the Prism Soul, and this card has Spectra, which means you can attack it and destroy it. A couple things to note about Merciful Retribution. First, if you target Merciful Retribution with an attack and is the only aura that you control, it still affects itself. Merciful Retribution will cause itself to go to your soul and deal 1 arcane to your opponent, even if it has no other auras out there on the board. This is from the release notes of Monarch and is simply how the card was designed to be worded, but effectively you can think about it as Spectra is triggered, it puts its effect on the stack, it then resolves and tries to destroy itself. While it's destroying itself, Merciful Retribution sees that it's trying to destroy itself, puts its own ability on the stack on top of that. The arcane and soul destination resolves, and then the merciful goes to the soul and it resolves. So Merciful Retribution affects itself, so don't be caught off guard by that. Additionally, you must be very careful to know that Merciful Retribution affects all auras that the Prism controls, including Frostbite tokens. Yes, that's right, Frostbite tokens are auras that you create under the control of your opponent, specifically the Prism player, which means that if you give them, say, 20 Frostbites off of an Ice Storm card as Alexi, and they flash out a Merciful Retribution in response, you're about to take 20 arcane damage, because yes, each of those Frostbites counts for Merciful Retribution's effect, and will deal arcane right back to you as a result of them destroying themselves in the end step. So be very careful as a Ice element player when you're playing against a Prism, because they can easily turn that damage back onto you with Merciful Retribution. That counts for also any neutral auras as well. Chains of Eminence, Enchanting Melody, any aura at all that the Prism controls works with Merciful Retribution. The light auras are what goes to Soul, and the new Illusionist auras do not go to Soul, which is very relevant because a lot of the times they will deal the arcane still, but you'll be able to avoid turning on things like Vestige of Soul by attacking the non-light auras, but still getting rid of things off the board. Alright, so that's Merciful Retribution in a nutshell. Also, it affects every other light aura, right? So if you try to break an Odarath while Merciful's out, the Odarath is also going to go to their soul. So be very careful about Merciful Retribution. It's very, very powerful. Odarath says, whenever a source you control would deal damage to your opponent loses 1 life. This is important because otherwise it'd be like an infinite loop, but effectively it doubles the damage of any of the pings that Prism is trying to deal to you, whether that be aura attacks with Luminaris or arcane pings with Merciful Retribution. Odarath is therefore normally a very high priority target. However, did you know there's another effect on Odarath? I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't, because it's very common actually. So Odarath actually also says that illusionist attack action cards you control have Go Again. This is incredibly important because Odarath being on the board allows you to pitch a blue card to give your illusionist attacks Go Again, but not your weapons. It specifically says illusionist attack action cards. That means that your heralds in other illusionist attacks that are actually attack action cards have Go Again, but your aura weapons don't. So if your opponent has Odarath and a bunch of cards out and pitches a blue, they don't have Go Again. They're not going to be able to attack you wide and deal a ton of damage to you. So be very careful on how you attribute blocks or how you attribute using your resources when they're only presenting 2 damage to you on a turn instead of maybe 8 or 10. So remember, Odarath gives their attack action cards Go Again, no matter what's in the pitch. However, another core game rule is that Go Again cannot stack, so if you have Go Again from Luminaris and Go Again from Odarath, you still only get the 1 action point back. You don't get to double up on Go Again, which is very relevant. Okay, so Arclight Sentinel. Core ruling that people tend to mess up. If Arclight Sentinel is not in the arena when you play a card or attack with a weapon, the Arclight Sentinel cannot redirect the attack to itself by coming in after the fact. Arclight Sentinel has to be in the arena when the attack is declared or played for Arclight Sentinel to force them to target it, because a target declaration happens when the card is put down or when the attack is declared. which means that the very first thing you do on your turn is declare an attack against the Prism player and they don't have an arc light, you can target their face and you will be sure that that attack will go through. However, make sure that you have no start of action phase triggers, because something like a Seismic Surge token or a Rune Blood incantation is going to trigger mandatory as an effect, and the Prism player can respond to those activated abilities with instants, and that means Arclight Sentinel. Same thing for Towering Titan or any of these other big buff cards. Make sure that you are not giving the Prism opponent new opportunities to flash in their Arclight and save their turn by blanking yours and then them getting some momentum back. Cool. Genesis, on the other hand, is normally pretty easy to get, but very important thing about Genesis is that priority in Flesh and Blood works like this. In the beginning of turn phase, no one gets priority. The action phase happens, that's where you get priority. And then the end phase happens, and no one gets priority there, and that's where Arsenal and Redraw and all these things happen. So Genesis triggers in the start of turn phase, which means that before and during a time where no one can get priority, Genesis lets you put a card from hand into your soul. If you put a light card into your soul, you draw a card, and if you put an illusionist card into your soul, you get to make a Spectral Shield token. However, if you put a light and illusionist card, the same combo, whether that be a light illusionist aura or a light illusionist attack like a herald, you get both effects, which means you can draw a card and put a shield into play. This is very important because you're able to get both benefits when you put the right card into your soul. Another thing you have to remember when you're playing these instant auras is that you can only play them during the action phase. If your opponent, let's say a Bravo, decides to go first and not swing their hammer, and they say, I want to move to the end step. As the Prism player, you can then say, okay, sure, before you go to the end step, I want to play Genesis. Well, then they can just attack your Genesis. Remember that even though you waited until they try to go to the end step to play this card, by playing the Genesis itself, you're still in the action phase. You gave priority back to the opponent, because now they get to do stuff again. And they still have an action point, they still have a weapon swing they can do, they can pay for it, so yes, they can kill your aura that you just played. You can't play Genesis during the end step like you might be used to doing in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic or something. Once you enter the end step in Flesh and Blood, that's it. There's no more actions that can be done unless it says so as a triggered ability on a card, such as things being destroyed in the end step. Beyond that, you have Parable of Humility. Parable of Humility reduces the attack of your opponent's cards by 1, whether they are attacking or defending. This is very important as a defensive card, but also as a way to get your heralds through Phantasm Breakers. By reducing a 6-powered card to a 5-power card, even in the middle of them blocking to try and break your Phantasm, the Parable of Humility will reduce it down to 5. The Phantasm will check and update and say, oh, that card is not a 6 anymore, I don't have to destroy myself. And your attack will go through. Parable of Humility, therefore, is extremely important in those fringe situations and can be very powerful. A core interaction that Parable of Humility can also do, especially now that we have the rules update coming to the game, is that once the blocks and reactions have all been declared and you go to damage calculation, you can actually respond after reactions are over with instants. So if you are playing against someone like a Lexi and she has used a Bolton shot with +1 attack to give it go again, it's coming at you for 5. If you flash in Parable of Humility or Blinding Beam, whether the case may be, you can reduce that Bolton shot's attack down to below its base, which will remove its own effect of having itself gain go again, and there's nothing your opponent can do about it except to respond with another instant, such as Rain Razors or the ever-present Lightning Press. So Parable does give you that ability to help jam your opponent's plays, especially if they are representing the fact that they don't have those cards in their hand, because you'll be able to very easily remove that go again from them and really jam up their turn. That's another core interaction there. Cool. Moving on, we've got the blue auras. We've got the illusionist auras. So Passing Mirage only affects the first illusionist attack you play a turn. And yes, you can flash it into play with Crown of Reflection on your turn by destroying one of your own auras, but that means that it actually doesn't remove the Phantasm trigger that's on the stack. The problem with Passing Mirage as an instant is that because the Phantasm has already been triggered, like let's say you attack with your Wartune Herald and your opponent blocks with a Command and Conquer. Well, if you destroy a Spectral Shield you control to put Passive Mirage into play, it will affect the War Tune. It will lose Phantasm, but because the Phantasm trigger is still on the stack trying to destroy itself, and the attack of the card blocking it is still 6, Phantasm is still true. It's still going to destroy the card under it, even though it's lost Phantasm by passing Mirage. At least that's the current understanding that I'm operating under as of this time. Similarly, if we have Pierce Reality as well, which allows us to give our first Illusionist attack +2 attack, as long as the card that is on the stack is the first Illusionist attack, it will gain the effect. So indeed, if we attack with Herald of Erudition, they block for 5, and we break Crown of Reflection and flash in Pierce Reality by getting rid of another aura we control, then yes, the Erudition being the first Illusionist attack on our turn does get the +2 damage and will get to go over their block. Moving on, you can also do this after reactions as well. So I'm pretty short. So you'll be able to wait until after reactions have done, then you flash it in. They no longer can respond with any of those, and then you can normally get over whatever they're blocking with. Shimmers of Silver is a card that gives +1 attack counters that are permanent to weapon auras that you control. It's once per turn, though, so make sure that you are not overcounting or double counting, and make sure you're doing it when you declare the attack. Because yes, when you attack with a card or a aura and it gets the +1 attack counter, that counter affects it on that attack. So if I attack with a card that had 1 attack and then it gets a +1 counter, it is now coming in for 2. That's how the card was designed. It works very well. Beyond that, we have Haze Bending, which only works once per turn to create a Spectral Shield token when a non-token aura that we control is destroyed. It also includes itself, so make sure that if they are destroying one of your many beautiful auras out here, that you are getting to trigger your Haze Bendings and get your Spectral Shield tokens. Keep in mind that if a token copy of an aura is just created by Mirage Metamorph, that Haze Bending will not trigger, as they are token versions. However, a token version of Haze Bending will trigger on itself to create a replacement Spectral Shield. So keep that in mind. Okay, cool. That's all the blue auras. And that's all of the important interactions there. Very good. Okay, so we've got Lead the Charge Red. Lead the Charge, or red or yellow, whatever, doesn't matter, has a very cool combo with Prism's cards. So if I were to play Lead the Charge, the next action card that I play gives me an extra action point if it costs a certain amount. If the card that I play has Go Again, the action point is going to be refunded when Go Again resolves, and the action point that Lead the Charge was giving us is still going to be present. So let's say I were to use Mage Master Boots to give my Shimmers of Silver Go Again. Well, if I play Lead the Charge and then activate Mage Master Boots and then play a blue aura, the blue aura is going to have Go Again off Mage Masters, and the Lead the Charge is going to give me an extra action point. This can be your way to destroy multiple auras on your opponent's turn while also developing multiple auras yourself. An important thing to note about this combo is that you can't do Mage Masters into Lead the Charge, because Lead the Charge already has Go Again. Because of this, if you give Lead the Charge Go Again twice, you won't get the action point back more than once, so you waste the Mage Masters here. However, like I said, if you do Lead the Charge into Mage Masters into your Shimmers, you actually do get the extra action point so that you can, either play multiple auras in a turn or kill multiple auras in a turn. Very, very useful combo there. Beyond that, you can do the same thing with Herald. So if I do Lead the Charge into a Herald, Go Again off Luminaris by pitching a yellow card, assuming this is not broken by a card with 6 attack through Phantasm, the Go Again will resolve, refunding the action point. I'll get an extra action point to again destroy multiple auras or play multiple auras in a turn. Very useful card in that situation. Also, keep in mind that if you play Lead the Charge and you attack the Herald, you have the action point no matter what happens. So even if they break your card with the Phantasm, you can still have the extra action point off Lead the Charge. And even if they break your attack, you can still use your Phantasmal Footsteps because a illusion attack you control was being destroyed. You can pay 1 and still get an extra action point back. So if you play Lead the Charge into a Herald, pitching a yellow, and they pop your Herald, you still have an action point off Lead the Charge. You can pay 1 off Footsteps to get your action point back and still have those 2 action points. Very useful combo there as well. Moving beyond that, GLSEN. GLSEN says distribute up to 4, 3, or 2 +1 attack counters among any number of weapons you control. At the beginning of your end phase, remove all +1 counters from weapons you control. However, if a permanent is no longer a weapon during your end phase, +1 counters on it are not removed. This means that if you have a aura weapon, such as one of our lovely Spectres here, or a Spectral Shield token, GLSEN will not remove its attack tokens during the end step because they're no longer weapons, because Luminaris specifically says during your action phase, illusions and auras you control are weapons. So action phase, they're weapons, end phase, they're not. GLSEN tokens, not removed. For this reason, GLSEN can be very useful for Prism because you can build up these permanent value engines over time, and you can distribute them however you wish. So if I had multiple auras out, and let's say this one is a yellow, it lets me put 3 tokens out there. I could put 2 onto a merciful, 1 onto an ode, or I could put 1 each on 3 different auras, or I could put all 3 on 1 aura, and they stay there. Once I put the aura tokens, like the +1 counters on those auras, they stay there. They're not able to be moved around or shuffled around. They are like a permanent buff on that card. Additionally, if I ever were to copy an aura, such as with Mirage Metamorph's effect, it does not copy +1 attack counters. So if I have a GLSEN up Merciful Retribution, it's got, let's say, 20 GLSEN tokens on it. Mirage Metamorph, when it pops and creates a copy of that Merciful Retribution, it'll be a base copy. It will not be one that has all the tokens on it. Moving on. Fractal Replication. When you play or defend with Fractal Replication, it gains the abilities and effects of all Illusionist attack action cards on the combat chain. Fractal Replication's attack and defense is equal to the greatest base of that type among Illusionist attack action cards on the combat chain. This is a very important card to know properly because it's new out of Everfest, and it's very interesting in how it works. So namely, if I were to attack with a Mirage Metamorph, it stays on the combat chain until I voluntarily close it. I then come in with a Fractal Replication. Fractal Replication is going to look at the combat chain and see what's there. And it will see 7 attack on an Illusionist card. It'll say, okay, boop, that's mine. I'm 7 now. It'll look at 3, and it'll put it over here. It'll always override to have the greatest of whatever's out there. So if you're of like the base attack, so if your opponent blocks with a Phantasmaclasm, Fractal Replication will also read that and bump itself up to 9 damage because it doesn't care who owns the card. It just cares that the attack on the chain is an Illusionist card. Additionally, Fractal Replication does not have Phantasm naturally. It, however, does gain Phantasm whenever it copies the effects of a card. Because when Fractal Replication copies the effects, what it really is saying is it's going to take the text that is on the Illusionist card, the attack action, and paste it onto itself. So if I've got Mirage Metamorph, it'll gain Phantasm and any written effects. However, obviously you have multiple instances of Phantasm. It's kind of redundant, but yes, technically, if you copied multiple attacks, you would have multiple instances of Phantasm. If I had multiple eruditions on the board, it would copy every erudition that's on the combat chain. However, it only copies the base effects. So if I were to do a Herald of Erudition into Fractal, the Fractal would only copy the first erudition. It would not copy the Fractal Replication copying the erudition. Right. Additionally, if your opponent, let's say, has already blocked with an erudition and you play Fractal Replication, your attack will come in for 5 dominate with the go again and the draw 2 and all that. But if they block with Mirage Metamorph, your card is not going to gain the effects of Mirage Metamorph because you've already played Fractal Replication. Fractal Replication only copies on play, not in response to your opponent's block. However, its stats are always updating. Fractal Replication is always looking to update its stats. So if your opponent blocks with a bigger card than was on the chain previously, so if they go from blocking with a 5 to a 7, Fractal Replication will see that and will go up to a 7 attack card in response to the block because that's always updating. And that's Fractal Replication. I think I got all the niche cases on that, but just to clarify, any effect given to your card is not copied. Only the base text written on the card is copied by Fractal Replication. Beyond that, we've got Herald of Erudition. Herald of Erudition I have on here because, yes, it's got Dominate. Yes, if it hits, it draws you 2 cards. Everyone who's played it against Prism knows what this card does because they've gotten probably destroyed by it the first time they let it hit. But the big thing about Erudition that I wanted to talk about is kind of a trick that Prism players can do with kind of any Herald, but especially Erudition. So if I attack with Erudition by pitching a blue card, I don't have Go Again, let's say, but I have a card in Soul and a card in hand. Well, if I hit with Erudition and we get past the reaction step, then I can pitch a yellow card to use Prism's ability in response to the on-hit trigger of Erudition to put a yellow into my pitch and then have it gain go again immediately, and then the go again will resolve. So until the Erudition has fully resolved, the go again can be given to it, even in response to its own hit trigger. So, however, it can't be given in response to it going to Soul. Once the Erudition goes to Soul, its attack on hit effect has resolved, and you no longer can give it go again. But if you do have that one card in Soul, you do have that one card in hand that's a yellow, you can respond with Prism's ability as an instant to give it that sneaky go again to get around block. So never let an Erudition hit really at all, ever, even if your opponent doesn't seem to have go again, because they can probably give it to them in another way. Unless you've ruled out every possibility, Erudition's a very scary card. And any Herald can do this as well, obviously. So Mirage Metamorph is a card that I want to talk about as well, because it's a little tricky. So when Mirage Metamorph is destroyed, create a token that's a copy of an aura you control. First thing to note about that is that it has the same type of text as Mirage Metamorph, or that does as Merciful Retribution. That being that it works on any aura you control. Tokens, non-tokens, generic, light, aura, illusionist, any aura you control, Miraging can copy. That includes Enchanting Melody, that includes Frostbite tokens. Mirage Metamorph, therefore, it's pretty interesting the fact that it can do all that, but you have to remember that it's creating a token copy of the aura. So let's say I were to create a token copy of Shimmers of Silver, and my opponent was to break it, the token copy, and the Haze Bending would be out on the board. Haze Bending wouldn't trigger because it says only non-token illusionist auras that are destroyed can make Spectral Shield tokens. Additionally, if Merciful Retribution has a token copy of a light aura on the board, that light token is not going to go to your soul because it has to be a non-token light aura. Cool. However, breaking a token aura will still deal arcane via Merciful Retribution. Cool. That's going to be about everything. Phantasmal Footsteps, remember that if it's attacked by a card that has 6 attack value that's not an illusionist attack, the Phantasmal Footsteps will break at the end of the combat chain. So if you say, were to buff your attack from a 4 attack to a 7 attack with something like a Lightning Press or something, you would break the Footsteps because it doesn't care about the base attack, it cares about the attack upon damage calculation. So you can break Footsteps in that way. Crown of Reflection can only be done on the Prism's turn that's activating it. Even though it is an instant, it can only be done during that Prism's action phase. And it does destroy the crown. Beyond that, I don't have any other real Prism intricacies to go into. I think we've covered just about all of the ways that auras work. The last thing I'll talk about is priority, just to give everybody an idea what priority is. So if an opponent has their turn, right? If it's the turn player and they're the non-Prism player, priority works where you play a card and you then ask your opponent, okay, I've played a card. Do you have a response before the card, resolves? That could be something like a Mordred Tide. You could play Mordred Tide as Viserai. The Prism might look at their hand and say, oh, I might want to play Arclight Sentinel in response. As the Viserai player against Prism, you should not just start Ramboing your hand on the board. You need to give the Prism a second to say, okay, wait, I'm thinking. Okay, yes, I want to play a card in response to Mordred Tide. That could be Arclight Sentinel, that could be whatever. And it's going to be the same thing for Kano as well. Prism and Kano both care about priority very much. However, if the Prism player plays, say, a Arclight Sentinel, the Prism player still gets a chance to play more instants. So while the Arclight Sentinel is on the stack, the card still needs to resolve, and so the Prism player then technically gives priority to the Viserai player. The Viserai player will say, okay, I have no instants to play, pass back to you. The Prism player can then resolve the Arclight Sentinel, and then the Viserai goes back to trying to resolve the Mordred Tide. Mordred Tide's still trying to resolve. Viserai says, okay, pass priority back to the Prism. Prism says, yes, I have another thing I want to play. Maybe I want to play Tome of Divinity and draw 3 cards. Whatever the case is, effectively, priority does not finish passing back and forth until both players look at the card on the board and say, yep, that's going to resolve now. So if Mordred Tide is still trying to resolve, until both players have stopped playing cards, that Mordred Tide is still not going to resolve. That really matters for things like Halo of Illumination, because Halo of Illumination is one of the key plays that you have that allows you to turn on all these instants all at the same time. And or just how Kano does arcane and like responds to his own arcane doing stuff. Halo is going to be very similar, where you want to break the Halo as an instant. Okay, you want it to resolve to put the card into Soul, but then you want to still do something before their card resolves. Maybe they're Mordred, or maybe they're become the Arc-Knight. So you're going to be able to, break your Halo before their card resolves. You get priority again. You can still play some stuff, and normally you'll be able to shortcut this, unless you're playing against like a Kano or another Prism. In which case, hopefully you both know how to play properly so that you can avoid any complicated ruling questions. But yeah, so again, once you're in the action phase, all of your like priority passing and instants can happen. But again, just to reiterate, once your opponent says, okay, go to proceed to the end step or pass priority, if you then take them on the priority, you are going to the end step. No more cards can be played. Your opponent's going to be able to arsenal, resolve any end of turn effects, and draw up at the end of their turn and proceed to clean up. But yeah, that about does it for the Prism kind of like crash course, I guess you could call it. These are tricks that Prisms can do against you, and these are tricks that you can do as Prism. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something useful here. And I hope you guys can take these tricks and bring them into your various games. One last note about Phantasm is that if I attack with a card that has Phantasm, or any card, into a card that has Spectra, Spectra does not destroy the attacking card. The Spectra is destroyed, but let's say I was attacking with Mirage Metamorph into a Shimmers of Silver. The Mirage Metamorph is not going to be destroyed by the Spectra card, so Mirage Metamorph will not trigger its own ability off of attacking a Spectra. That's another one I wanted to point out. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Thank you for watching. This video and videos like it are made possible thanks to viewers like you. If you enjoy the video, please leave a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more flesh and blood content. Thank you to all the patrons who help make this video content possible, starting with the Dreamweaver tier patrons. Tara Blitz, thank you for your continued support. It means a lot and makes everything we do here possible. Moving on to the Sentinel tier patrons, we have Bon, David Romish, Exploding Potatoes, Frederick Lundovic, Jacob, Joe Gianoli, P13TR2U, Ronnie Martin, Tim J, and Todd Stewart. For the Herald tier patrons, thank you to Alex Enslow, Andy Lee, Callum Bousfield, Carlos Carrero, Christopher D. Bates, Douglas De Jong, Ike Vicagan, Eric Borg, Francesco Lorenzi, Henrik, Jay Kitsos, Jake Arms, Jake Bennett Dwyer, Joel Wilhelm, John N. Downing Jr., Michael Stowell, Moonshaker, Muskrat Tuck, Nicholas Astner, Oxalati, Raymond Scott, Starman Jones 7, Ty Craig, Valentine N, Will Fry, and Zombie Z. And for the Spectral Shield tier patrons, thank you to Andrew Good, Bryce Morgan, Drew Wagers, Rachel, and Sarazar.